Welcome to Lift Your Legacy. My name is Jacob Prupp, father, husband, and rabbi. And each week we bring you an inspiring person or message to help you unlock your inner potential and create change that will impact the future. Thank you for listening, and let's get to it.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for the ongoing support. It means so much to have you listen and feedback, and I feel great that there's that some real values being transmitted here. So thank you for letting me be a part of your process. I am thrilled to have on today a woman who was so highly recommended by so many people I look up to. Her name is Michelle Saul. She runs possibilities.co, which is an executive consulting company. They run retreats, they do seminars, and they help people in the corporate and private space live better lives, get out of their own head, learn how to control the voices in their heads, and to be more emotionally intelligent and overall happier. It's such an important topic that only becomes more important as time goes on. So there's a lot to write down here. Please get your notes ready, and you might even have to listen to this twice. Thank you so much for joining me today. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, Lift Your Legacy is committed to helping you live a more authentic and meaningful life. That being said, if I could ask you to share this podcast with someone that you think would get value from the message, that would be fantastic. In addition, I wanted to make you aware that along with the podcast, I do offer executive coaching. I help people who are successful and highly motivated, who want to see extreme, or not even so extreme, maybe just a small change that in their life. I want to help them get to the next level. What does that mean specifically? Creating more peace in your relationships with yourself, growing your business, clarifying your career. And even if you need a little bit of help losing some weight or getting more healthy, I do that also. I'm not for everyone, but for those people that are invested in making their life better and taking the next step, I highly recommend you consider me as a coach for you. Now, how do you get in touch? Well, you found the podcast. I wanted to tell you also my email, Jacob, my first name, jacob@liftyourlegacy.live. Feel free, please, to reach out there or on any or all of my social media channels. I'd be thrilled to give you a complimentary half an hour conversation to see if we might be a good fit to work together. And now, with no further ado, I ask you to please sit back and enjoy the show. Michelle Saul, I have heard so many amazing things about you. I'm surprised that it's taken this long for us to actually have a conversation. You love all things that I am passionate about, from the ability to help people become more emotionally intelligent and live the lives that they want, to fitness, to mindset, to everything business. So I'm so honored and appreciative for you coming on the show today.
My pleasure.
So, Michelle, how did you get started? We mentioned in the pre-call you have personal training background. Like, how do you get to today?
How did I get to today? Well, it's quite a long journey, and I'll try to consolidate it. Basically, I started dancing very early age, and I got my degree from UCLA in dance therapy. Grew up in Los Angeles. And when I was 24, my parents sent me to a personal development seminar. It was called LifeSpring. It was in 1977.
Nice.
And I was 24 years old. I had very low self-esteem. I had no idea what I was going to do with my life. And I went into this personal development growth seminar, and it kind of blew my doors open.
Can I stop you and just go rewind a little bit back to you growing up, like what your family background was like and what your experience was that sort of led you up until that point where, as you said, you sort of struggled with self-esteem and issues like that. I'm assuming if you go to UCLA, you probably come from I was a rabbi there. So like, I sort of know some of the student body, and it's like most people there do come from, in most cases, nice, like upbringing, but then do have these esoteric crises of conscience that people that have backgrounds like that theoretically shouldn't have in the common nomenclature.
why would you have low self-esteem issues when you grow
Right.
up like that? Well, for me, I had an extraordinary family, four siblings, two parents that have been together since they were 13. My father has simply since passed, but I grew up in a really, with all of these beliefs. It wasn't about where you were, if you were going to go to college, it was where you were going to go to college. And I loved to dance, and my family was very loving and very supportive and very philanthropic. And I grew up with a set of values that were definitely Jewish values. Tikkun olam, how to repair the world. When all my life, when people will say, I don't understand, everybody talks about purpose and you're supposed to find your purpose and what's your purpose. And that always confused me a little bit, because from the time I was born, it was, your purpose is to make the world a better place. So that was always my background. And then my personal self-esteem, being able to sort of let my own light shine, is a very personal story. And that was when I was a young child. My sister, when she was 10, was diagnosed with the juvenile type 1 diabetes. And I was 8 years old, and my parents, when my sister survived, she went into a coma, she came out of the hospital. And at 8 years old, my sister and I shared a room, and my parents taught me at 8 how to pay attention to how my sister was breathing in case she went into another, lost consciousness or went into acidosis. So from the time I was 8, I kind of grew up, but I always felt like my life was responsible for taking care of other people, which actually fits my DNA. It's just kind of how I was raised and how I was born and how I sort of feel from the inside out. But my sister always struggled with her weight, and I didn't when I was young. And so I was always kind of embarrassed to be called out because it hurt my sister's feelings. So I kind of learned very early on to turn my light down. It wasn't okay to let my light shine, because letting my light shine caused other people discomfort or hurt or pain. And I somehow incorporated that. Of course, you don't know that as a child. That takes development and therapy and conversations and with other people to sort of unpack all of that. Where did that come from? Why was I so insecure?
So just to bullet point a couple of those ideas and make sure I'm hearing it correctly. One of the points was that even though you sort of had a expected, what am I here for? Mm-hmm. It was such a general, what am I here for, that the individual, like you, like, what do you do and how do you do that? And so it's so focused on, and I think this is a common theme that is so universal, is there is such a focus on all of the quote problems that I should be solving, that we don't ever slow down and ask, who am I to go and solve those problems? Not like, exactly. What am I worth? But like, practically speaking, how do I get to know myself well enough so I can best use my skills? So that's the first thing you're saying. And the second thing was that because you were a caretaker and because you had to grow up, and again, so many people growing up have to deal with sort of growing up, sometimes children of addicts or coming from a divorced home, or in your case with siblings that were unwell, that you're so focused on other people, you can't focus on yourself at a young age. That's very difficult. And of course, that's a theme that probably people struggle with their whole lives, is,
a big theme, right?
Like as a husband or a wife or a parent, like, who are you, as opposed to who do you have to take care of? And right. Then also you carried on your shoulders the fact that whatever made you special was going to be harmful to the people that you loved. And so to speak, you would hold yourself in so that you didn't make big waves.
Exactly.
Okay.
So that's perfect. That was very well encapsulated. And so, I sort of learned to turn my light down and sort of fly under the radar. And then I went and did this workshop, and my sister and I actually did it together. So it was actually incredibly healing. We were able to talk about that. She just we just sort of opened our hearts to each other. And this voice in my head, I had these warring voices. One voice said, this is extraordinary work. This is what I want to do. This is the purpose of how I can make an impact in the world. And then I had my self-doubt voice kick in and go, who do you think you are that you could do this and stand in front of a groups of people, or, help people out of their own problems? And so I just quieted that voice down, and I learned skills and techniques and took courses and classes and seminars to learn how to quiet my self-doubt voice and start to have more positive self-talk. I kind of say it like this. Would you keep as a best friend someone who talks to you the way that you talk to you?
No.
And I realized, no, probably not, because I was so hard on myself. And so I started practicing, because it's a practice, just like yoga or mindfulness. It all takes practice. It doesn't just happen by waving a magic wand. You've got to have commitment and intention and stay with it. And most people, it's like, well, I tried meditation, that didn't work.
Well,
I tried that once, and they give up, right?
I think what's really fascinating about what you're saying, and I think are two very important and crucial points. First of all, the idea of being able to have difficult conversations with the people that we love.
Yes.
And, if that's a sibling, if that's a parent, if that's a spouse, if that's a boss or a child,
how do you say those things out loud?
Right. And they're always in the back there. You're like, I'm tired of taking care of you, or, you make me feel so bad, or I don't like when you talk to me that way. And because the relationships are such that there's so much like riding on them, we oftentimes feel like the other person can't hold how we feel.
Yeah.
And
we project that. We make that assumption in our minds, project that, and so then we withhold.
Exactly. But then you're saying it's like so amazing when I just reflecting back, like I had the opportunity to kind of speak very candidly with my mom and ask her about my father and her divorced. And so we had a very candid conversation about, like what happened and what were you thinking and how did this work? And as much as I always was terrified of that conversation, sort of looking at it and realizing that, and we always had that with our parents. It's like, they're just people that are doing the best job they can. And they were young too once, it's very healing. And then the second point is, which I loved, is that we sort of take our negative voice and we think that's reality. Right. And, it's like, the reality is I suck. I would like to do this and X, Y, and Z. And once you kind of shift and realize that voice is actually something that you can control and sort of step aside of that. And then, like you said, it takes practice. You can actually shut down that negative.
Quiet it down.
Yeah.
One of the skills that I teach is to teach people, like I ask them, we usually have like a committee of voices inside of our head. So do you have a self-righteous judgmental voice? Uh-huh. Do you have a victim voice? Poor me. Yeah, I got one of those. Do you have a rebel voice? The minute somebody says, okay, here's the rules, right? Do you have a little kid voice, when you get your feelings hurt? So I said, so when I'm doing my work, the voice inside of you that I want you to focus on, because what you pay attention to determines what you see. What you pay attention to determines what you miss. What you pay attention to determines where you're going to put your energy. So if you're focusing on that negativity, that's what you're going to create. So what voice are you listening to inside your head? And so I said, well, let's give it a name, because the secret of the universe is the true naming of things. So what if the name is your most adult resourceful voice? You can call it Marv if you want to, most adult resourceful voice. And I train people to have that resourceful part of themselves, ask themselves, all right, is what I'm thinking, is this the truth, or is this a self-limiting belief? Because we, like exactly what you just said, we're convinced that that voice in our head is the truth. And it's not. We just think it is. And then we look around the world and look for stories and incidences that we can prove ourselves right. And then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. That's what we end up, that's the reality that we create. So I work very hard on training people that you get to create your reality. What reality do you want to create? You get to create that.
I just to clarify for the listeners that while both of us are Jewish, we did not go through our we didn't compare notes before this. I wanted to share what I found is what you just said, which I did not prompt you on, was about the power of naming.
Yes,
and
that's a very concept. It's also a Native American concept as well.
Amazing, right? So you see, like that's a concept. Oftentimes it's overlooked. It's like that the very first thing that in the Genesis story that it talks about what Adam did was he named all the animals and he named God, he named himself and he named his wife. And that whole concept is that there is nothing that is. And again, this sounds so Eastern and like everyone's like, yeah, but I didn't grow up with that kind of stuff. It's like, no, well, if you read the Bible at some point in your religious tradition, you did grow up with that stuff, which is right. Which is recognizing that everything ultimately is waiting for humanity to put their lens on.
Yes. That's what awesome. Creates it. That's what creates it. Exactly. So I teach people that and facilitate that to help people create that experience, that they're the ones that get to manage that. And naming things is extraordinarily powerful. So when somebody says, and that inner voice is saying, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not tall enough, I'm not whatever enough, we start to believe that. We don't see it as a belief anymore. We're convinced that it's just what is.
Something that's so exciting, tell me a little bit about your experience with the crossover is, after technology really took off in, the early 2000s, and you see the rise of all of these, the unicorn, Googles and Teslas, and, like the world is really optimal. So it's like, in a certain way, nowadays we can appreciate when someone like Elon Musk says that he's going to hire people that don't graduate high school. And that's kind of, because he wants to kind of get before the real brainwashing starts. Because you started your practice before that time, what has it been like bringing this idea of mindfulness and coaching into corporate America and the workspace and not leaving it for the yoga studio or the local, however people choose to connect spiritually?
That's a great question. Well, first of all, the other Kabbalistic construct that I always hold.
We're having such a good time right now. Thank you.
Is that as human beings, we are simultaneously living in four worlds. It's the four worlds, right? We're living in the physical, the emotional, the intellectual, and the spiritual. In the corporate world, what I discovered is that you don't typically have permission to use the word spiritual. That sounds like religion. I'm not talking about religion. I'm talking about, when I use the word spiritual, I'm using a construct of connection and purpose, that you are specifically, uniquely important to your world and the people in it. And so when I'm holding that construct, bringing that into the corporate world, I just get in under their radar. For example, I'll use the construct of, well, how much stress are you under in your technology, where you feel like you just want to get information and give information. You don't want to have to talk to people, and you don't want to have a heart connection, because that's touchy-feely and that doesn't belong in business. So I talk about it from how we support each other. I talk about it for how you feel connected. I talk about it from, look, people don't really care how much you know until they know how much you care. Well, that's about connection. So, okay, so how do we get past that? And then I talk about, well, how much stress are you under? I use a personality profile that measures energy reserves and stress. So if somebody's stressed, so now I can get in under their radar and talk about stress. Well, let's talk about how you manage stress. Well, that requires breathing. That requires slowing down to speed up, a counterintuitive process. Let's slow down in order to speed up. You have to take your breath. Well, so then I talk about it from the Latin word spiritus, means to breathe. So let's slow down. And so I teach breathing techniques. I teach mindfulness so that people also can have the opportunity to go inward, to actually listen to their own answers, that their own resourceful voice inside of them really knows their brain, their cognitive brain, their heart brain, and their gut brain. And that.
1 second, I feel like I'm overwhelmed by a fire hose right now, and
I get very passionate.
I love it. No, it's fantastic. So I want to do a couple of bullet points here, which is crucial. Which is, first of all, like we said, a lot of times people feel the word spiritual. Are you spiritual? God, religion. People are like, I don't know. Like, I'm not sure.
Or they freak out at the word God. That's so uncomfortable for them. So, all right. So how can you translate that?
Right. So then, but then it's like, okay, like practically in your life, is there a sense of a connection of oneness that you have, that you have shared commonalities, ideals with people, and everyone can connect to a certain extent with that. When you read something, you feel passionate about it. When you feel drawn towards something, that's point number one. Point number two. Now, this is amazing. Spirit is the word, spirit, the Latin word meaning breath. And again, pulling from a Jewish source, the idea that the way that God sort of woke humanity up was by breathing and being able to, how to breathe and how to communicate. And the other thing, which was like might have been a throwaway line for you, but I was like, this is amazing. So often we have the whole idea about imposter syndrome and who am I to get up and give this kind of a talk? And what you said is that and it's a beautiful thing because it's so counterintuitive. You're a dance major that goes in and, counsels people that are running multi-million-dollar, $100 million companies. And it's like, gee, what, $100 million company did you ever raise? And the answer is like, I didn't. But what I did do was I learned this information. I'm coming from a place of service, and I'm not trying to tell you how to invest your money, right? What I'm trying to tell you is how to live according to a life pattern that I myself have been able to work on and develop. And so it's like, I don't have to be your everything. I can just share my experience with the hope that it makes you better in the area that you need from me.
That's right. How can I help you be a better person? If you can be a better person and have self-confidence, get past the imposter syndrome, know and recognize your unique talents, be completely open and honest about where your areas of improvement are and what your blind spots are, then you're going to be a better leader. You're going to be a better husband, a better wife, a better partner, a better manager, a better coworker, a better dad, a better mom, just a better human. And that's the most important thing of all. There's nothing more important than that. And one of the things I've also loved from my Jewish background that has stuck with me forever, a couple of things. One is the idea of win-win. How can I see myself as winning at someone else's expense? And I learned that as a child during the Passover service, when you take your glass of wine, which is the symbol of joy and gladness, and you take some of that wine out, because while the Israelites escaped, that required a lot of Egyptians to die in the Red Sea, or so the story goes. So how can we be fully rejoicing when other people of humanity are suffering? So I learned that as a very young child. I thought that was an amazing construct. The other thing,
I'm sorry to interrupt. I think that piece, I used to be very involved in politics, even though my political affiliations have swung wildly. And then as I became a rabbi, I lost a lot of my interest in it, genuinely, just because I felt like it wasn't, and that was a while ago. Like now it's even more divisive. So just like, I don't touch anything, but I feel like that point is oftentimes what people perceive as the largest setback for the polarization of the political world, which is basically, it's not like that you don't have a perspective, but it's just like my perspective is such that I lose compassion for the people on the other side of the aisle. And I think if the message, even if it's a polarizing message, even if we're going to take, so to speak, the country or the company or our lives in a radical direction, having that compassion for, hey, I always used to be your enabling partner, but now I can't. Or I always used to, grumble and then give you the money that you needed. And now I'm going to smile and not give you the money that you need. It's like, if you have that compassion, so it allows you a lot more latitude to do what you know is right, even if it's going to be offensive, because you're making space for the offensive and you're doing the right thing anyway.
That's right. And so what's interesting about that is I teach emotional intelligence, and really there's people go, well, what does that mean? Or there's, how do I do that? And it's possible to increase your ability to have empathy. And there's really three kinds of empathy. There's cognitive empathy, which is, I understand what you're saying. That stays cognitive. Then there's emotional empathy, where I actually feel what you're feeling. I've had a close enough experience where I actually can feel the feelings that you're feeling. And then there's compassionate empathy, where not only can I understand it and feel it, now I want to do something about it. I want to actually support and be in service, and how can I help? And so all those different layers, not everybody taps into all those different layers of empathy. So in the workshops that we teach, that's what we pay attention to. Teaching visually, auditory, and kinesthetically, so people have a felt sense of, well, how do I create that feeling of empathy and that feeling of compassion where I really want to do something about it? And one of the things that I teach at the end of that, and that I've always struggled with our American culture, because our American culture really thrives on individualism, right? You got to be separate and take care of yourself, individualism. And here I am in the corporate world teaching teamwork. So how do we create places where it's important to be independent, places where it's okay to ask for help and be dependent and get advice and help from other people, and where can we create a sense of interdependence? And the challenge I have found in our American culture, it's right in our Constitution, is that we have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That has gotten us into a whole lot of trouble, because we equate happiness with, well, how many toys do I have? What kind of house do I live in? And it equates to this materialism that gets us farther and farther away from our compassion and our hearts.
That's so fascinating. And I never even thought about that. This idea that from the Constitution, we put on the same pedestal happiness, life, and liberty. And so like life and liberty, we totally understand, like, I will go to war for these two things because the value is so intrinsic to society. But like I'm sure you've seen, it's like if a person simply pursues happiness, happiness is an outcome in a lot of cases of being in line with yourself or in line with your cause. But if you pursue, like meaning or connection, so then the happiness kind of comes on the back end as just an additional benefit.
The happiness is the consequence of living a really good life. If we're accountable and honest and clear and truthful and compassionate and all of those qualities where we are, really living. It's like, even when we think about our high holidays, we don't typically say Happy New Year. We say Shana Tova, may you have a good year. Live a good life and the happiness will follow.
One of the things on that idea, which is so, it's really fascinating, because when you look at America and where they get where the values, I don't want to say we Americans get the values from, right? It's that hybrid of Jewish and then the Greco-Roman world, and putting all these different things, Judeo-Christian, and we take all these ideas together. And it was fascinating. I remember when Obama said that line about, if you have a business, you didn't build it, and the implication being that there's a lot of infrastructure that goes onto it. And then the people that I was hanging out with, it was saying, well, how could you say that? What about the rugged individualism? And it's really fascinating, because that is the concept behind, from a Jewish perspective, of Shabbat, where you work 6 days and then you take the seventh off, which is the idea that the individual effort is crucial, but we do exist in a world where everything's basically got us up to this place, and everything's going to be fine if we can take the foot off the gas, which is that, same idea of exactly the idea of slowing down to speed up. Ultimately, if I feel safe, protected, that the resources I need are there, that the team I need is there, that everything I need for my next, I don't know how I might get, to my whole life, but just the next couple of steps, it's already there and it's already present in my life. I just have to look around and say, okay, what do we need right now? Or what can I do right now?
Yeah.
That's how a person is able to always achieve from a place of satisfaction and abundance, as opposed to that very sad limiting type of achievement where you're cutting people down and you're not even happy when you get to where you want to get to, and you have all these same exoteric crises that you have.
These people that they're lonely. It's or they're, been married 4 times, or, their grown children aren't talking to them. So I work very carefully to help heal those places. I mean, there are some folks that definitely are toxic and don't want to change. And so you just give it your best shot. You change any part of the system, one part of the system, and it will change. We keep trying to change things by doing the same thing over and over again. And as we know, that doesn't work very well. So who can we change? We keep wanting the outside world to change, and we're the ones that need to look inward and do the change. And to your point, the quote, Hillel's quote, that is so extraordinary. If I am not for myself, who will be for me? If I can't be on my own team, put the oxygen mask on myself first. If I don't have self-trust, self-love, self-respect, how can I expect the rest of the world to have that for me? I've got to start from the inside out. Then Hillel also said, but if I am for myself only, what am I? Where's my tribe? Where's my team? Where's my humanity? If I only stay focused on myself, that doesn't work. And then if not now, when? What are we waiting for? We don't know how much time we have. None of us really knows. So why don't we start now?
So just to clarify for the listeners that it's, there's so many, that was a beautiful way to say it. A mentor of mine, Jordan, I don't know him, but I'm a huge fan. I was doing a lot. His name's Jordan Peterson. He always speaks about, make your bed before you go out and try to fix the world. Is at a certain point, you have to take responsibility. When you're looking around, you're saying, my team's not doing what my team needs, or my wife not doing what my wife needs to do, taking that responsibility and saying, have I created, and it sounds exactly like what you were saying at the beginning of the discussion, where at 24 years old, growing up, knowing you how to fix the world, and growing up and going to, some of the best institutions in the countries, and having this wonderful family, like, you were lost because there wasn't the focus on you first. And that's where so many people get off track. And it's like, well, I make so much money with my business, or I do so much for my spouse, or XYZ. It's like, but would you hang out with yourself? Do you spend time by yourself, asking yourself what you need right now? And like most people, like the most successful people in the world, they never even think about that kind of thing. It's a crazy thing.
That's really true. Yeah. It's like, why put so much focus on the outside? Because our fear is, well, if I focus on myself, then that's arrogant, selfish, self-serving. And we have this negative connotation for it as opposed to just having it be a natural, healthy ego from a healthy place, not from an arrogant, self-serving place. And that's why it takes that interdependence, that I've got to have personal self-talk, self-love, self-respect, and then I can take that out into the world so that I have I have the stamina and the energy to be in service and not in sacrifice. Big difference.
You've been in this game for a long time, and
yes.
it's been, how trendy it is, and what it is and how it goes and all this kind of stuff. You've seen a lot of patterns and it coming into popularity and out, and how it shifts. What do you see for yourself? I know that you mentioned that you love doing retreats and these kinds of things. Like, where do you see the work that you do going? Are there new things that are kind of coming into it? Is it more kind of going back to basics and just speaking in the new language that people need to hear? Where do you see it going, and what really excites you about the path that your company is charting going forward?
It's a great question. Thank you. First of all, that saying, everything old is new again. The concepts that we teach inside of our retreats and inside of our corporate trainings, they've been around for a really long time. But we've got this new generation, and they haven't heard these concepts in quite these same ways. Now, some of them they have, like the idea of win-win, but they still don't understand what that really means, because they're still focused on, well, how are they going to get their house or meet their partner, or all of those things that we do at that certain age range. And so where I see ourselves going is continuing to build communities, build this recognition that business, in order to be successful, purpose-driven businesses matter. So that's changing. The ability to still teach retreats, to still teach people how to have positive self-talk. That has not changed. We're still humans. That has just, it's consistent. When you ask people to say, what would you like to get out of this seminar? Consistently, it doesn't matter if they're a CEO or a stay-at-home mom or dad, they have the same fears, the same human concerns. That has not changed. And so to be able to go in there and still create an environment that is completely safe for people to share and self-disclose, that is still consistently very strong and very powerful. How we do it, we'd like to build our retreat center up in Oregon. We've kind of come full circle. We've got a beautiful piece of property up in Oregon, and we use the river as a metaphor quite a lot. And so that's our next dream, and leaving a legacy for our children. And for me personally, see, it's so interesting when somebody says, so what is in there? What's going to be next for you? I still automatically go to talk about what it's going to be like for everybody else. And I need to also press the pause button and say, wait a minute, what about how am I going to do that for myself so that I can be there for everybody else? And so I meditate and do yoga every day, first thing in the morning. And my dream for myself is to pass this on to the next generation. And not just leave a legacy of, we have this beautiful property up in Oregon to leave to our children and as a retreat center. My dream is to leave the work and the constructs and the ideas that we teach passed down to our children, and start training the next generation of facilitators so that this can continue and people can find their way to how to take care of yourself as an individual and be a part of a community that wants to do good things in the world. So my plan is training the next generation of facilitators.
What's so beautiful about what happened, just for the to point that out for the people that didn't pick that one up, was the grace with which you noticed that you were not done in the evolution, and consistently working on ourselves, which I can't. The older I get, and I was giving a talk about, I didn't pick the topic, someone else picked the topic about, the Jewish perspective on success. And I was sitting with people that literally ran billion-dollar companies and had bigger families than me, and were happier than me and all that kind of stuff. I said, I don't have anything to tell you guys, but ultimately it's about being aware that we're all in that work, and that even if we do have roles as leaders in our communities, that we shouldn't for one second think that we're done, and that we don't need to be connected back to our practice, and to have that humility, which was like beautiful that you displayed that, and also that sense that the work is never done. And I learned a lot. I interviewed a guy who's now one of the experts on the opioid epidemic, and he said that really at the core of it, it's all loneliness. And so the fact that you on the front lines of of the fight for self-esteem is saying we need to build community, I think is a big validation. And also going back to nature. It's like at the end of the day, we're a person that needs to learn how to breathe. We have to connect. There's all of the metaphors. It's not like Tesla's new invention, as great as that might be. I can also learn a lot from a river, which has been there for thousands of years. You know what I mean?
That's
it's a tremendous concept.
Yes, because that's really what it takes, that ability to slow down and breathe and say, well, why are we working this hard so that we can, are we living to rest, or are we resting to live? It's like, how do we, taking that day off, there's a reason why you take time off to rejuvenate. And the older I get and the more I know, the more I realize how much I don't know.
Beautiful. So might as well get started now, because there's not,
might as well.
You don't graduate from this stuff.
No, you don't. It's constant. And I'm learning a lot from this next generation, particularly around gender fluidity and language and how we speak so that it's more inclusive, and trying to help people that even though you might have these beliefs, can we listen and understand to the other person and not immediately go to judgment? Because it's impossible to be in judgment and be listening at the same time. You just can't.
Right.
So how do we learn how to suspend judgment and get present so that we can truly start to have compassion for the other and not just demonize each other, which I keep thinking we can't get more polarized, and then we do. And I've got to stop myself when I go to that same place and go, there I am doing the very thing that I'm in resistance to, because that's how resistance works. So I'm in process all the time to keep learning this stuff.
I love it. Michelle, thank you so much.
It's been a joy.
I learned so much. Tell me, please, how my listeners can find out more about what you and your family does, and potentially work with you, reach out to you, and learn about what your company does.
Absolutely. Well, our URL, our website is possible, possible.co. And we have on our website, we have the corporate work that we do and the intentional culture that we teach, and the executive coaching. And then we have our emotional intelligence seminars, where we have 3 levels. We have one which is very much about learning that self-talk and how we create our own reality. The second about creating a new definition of ourselves in the second level. And then the third level, we go to Sedona and go out into the Red Rocks and
so good,
and be in nature, because that is where, as Heschel said, that's where the word radical comes from. Radical awe, right? This is awesome, because when we're in nature, we look around, we didn't create that. And that's what gets us to that place of connection and oneness. So how people can contact me at michelle@possible.co. It confuses people. It's not .com. It's just .co. And MICHELLE. I'm Michelle with 2 L's. And I'm happy to take personal emails and personal connection from anyone and talk to them more about our seminars. And we like to keep them small and intimate so that a lot of deep work can happen in a very short amount of time.
Amazing.
I say short, 3 days. Some people, that's the different context. 3 days. Oh my gosh, how am I going to take 3 days, right?
I'm profoundly upset, because I usually have a very easy time titling all of my interviews, and you haven't made that easy for me. I'm like, no, what am I going to do?
Me too.
But
and we both need to get moving. So it's
absolutely
been an absolute delight. I'll look forward
you.
to staying in touch down the road.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
There you have it, folks, another inspiring episode. If you enjoyed this, I ask you to please share this with your friends and to like us over on Rabbi Rupp through Facebook or on YouTube. And the more that we're able to get these important messages out, the more that we can really make an impact in the world. So I encourage you, please, to stay tuned. We have a ton of amazing speakers coming up, and also to tell your friends about it. Thank you very much.